Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video I'm going to be forging a integral camp knife, all by hand. I'll be starting with this bar of 1¼ round W1 tool steel. My first step is going to be forge 2 flats on this. That's going to turn it from a round cross section to kind of, I don't know, a squished oval. That's just going to make it easier to forge the rest of this out, and that's kind of closer to our like bolster dimension size that we're looking for. Now I'm starting to forge this point in. I do have a lot of steel to move, but I'm swinging a big hammer and I'm taking nice hot heats. So it's really not too bad, though that being said, a power hammer or a press would make this a lot faster. Another thing to pay attention to is the neater your forging is, the cleaner and nicer everything's going to come out, generally. So I just like to take my time forging and make each step nice and crisp. I've just found that kind of makes things go better overall. Now I've got my guillotine tool out. I'm using this to create that first isolation at the front of the bolster, to isolate the material from the bolster to the blade. I'm just using this tool that way I can have 2 nice, even indents, and then I can actually start spreading that blade out now with the cross peen. You'll notice as I spread this material, it's kind of widening both ways. And now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of hanging it over the edge of the anvil and knocking that blade all down to one side, because I want to create that nice flat spine straight out of the bolster, and I don't want the material just squeezing out into a big shovel shape. Now that I've got a pretty good preform, I'm going to start thinning out my blade and forging in some bevels just until I get to my final thickness and profile. I'm going to use the crosspeen of this hammer to just kind of pull the material wherever it needs to go. This first step is pulling down the heel, which is really easy with a nice thick crosspeen like this. Do it from both sides and just draw that material out. After that, I can kind of work my way down the blade and forge some nice even bevels and get a nice consistent even taper. Now I need to cut this blade off the bar so I can turn it around and start forging out the tang. I'm just hot cutting it because it's already hot and there's no sense waiting for it to cool down to cut it with an angle grinder or anything like that. Might as well just get it hot and hot cut it right off. Once again, I'm using the guillotine tool. This is just letting me isolate out and draw out some material for the tang really easily. Works really good. Once I've got that kind of started, I'm going to go to the edge of the anvil to finish forging that out. Well, the forging is basically done at this point. All that's left to do is take a couple planishing heats, get the thing straight, and put my touch mark on it. After forging, I'll do one normalizing cycle to reset some of the grain in this knife, just heating to maybe an orange and letting it air cool. After that, I'll do a quick profile grind, and then I'll throw the knife in the oven for a full anneal before hardening and tempering. I'm turning my salt pots on so that can get up to temperature so it's ready to go after I'm done hardening. And then I'm going to just throw the knife into the oven to get hot for the quench. So, I will be quenching this in water, which is actually a little sketchy. It went pretty well, but I would still suggest if you were doing this, probably quench in something like Parks 50. I only have AAA, and that's been giving me some weird results. So I decided to try water for this, just mostly as an experiment. It went well, but I've also had some struggles with this too. So, yeah, the water quench went well. Went straight into the salts to temper right after that. Didn't really let it sit around, give it a chance to crack or anything like that. But it did warp a little bit. I got a little bit of an S-curve, but fortunately I was able to just fire up the salts again get the knife back up to tempering temperature about 400 degrees, and use my 3-pin setup in the vise to get that fixed. Now that the blade has been heat treated and straightened, it's time to do some rough bevel grinds. I'm not going to take these all the way just yet, but I'm going to get them, roughed in pretty good. Just going to grind those in, starting with a 60 grit. Once I've got those pretty started, I'm going to go and stick a file guide on this bolster and see if I can get my shoulders flattened up and ground for the back side of the bolster. Now that I've got that bolster flattened off, I'm going to cut up some material for spacers. I've got black G10 and silicon bronze. I'm going to do a nice little 3-spacer stack. It works pretty good to hold them together with vice grips like that for drilling. Also just means I can come straight off the drill press and go to the vise and start filing on it without having to line anything up or anything at all like that. It's just pretty nice. I can work all 3 of them together without having to super glue them together or anything like that, which is pretty nice. But once I've got those spacers fitted on, I've got this nice block of stabilized curly willow that I actually cut and dried and stabilized myself. This is from a tree that came down in my yard. It's some beautiful wood, so I'm just going to start drilling out this tang slot that I've got marked on there, and I'm going to get this block fitted up. Now that I've got all my parts fitting up together, I'm going to go ahead and glue everything up. I'm just using some West Systems G-Flex epoxy with some black dye in it. This is the epoxy I like. I don't know. It works. It's good. Just going to get that block on there, get everything epoxied together, and I'll stick a clamp on it, let that cure overnight, and then I can just continue with my handle shaping. We're going to start off on the bandsaw just to cut that profile out, and then I can go to the grinder and just start cleaning everything up and doing all my sculpting and shaping and all that. Now I'm using my rotary platen on the slack with a 2-inch wide scalloped 220 and then 400 grit belt, just to basically sand out that handle, get everything cleaned up, get that transition from the bolster to the wood, from the steel to the wood, all nice, get everything polished out, ready for hand sanding, and then I'm actually going to go back and finish my bevel grinds on the blade. I'm going to start off with flat grinding on a 60 grit, and then I'm going to swap out the slack belt on my rotary platen with a 120 and then a 220. And then after that I'll use a Scotch-Brite to get the surface finish. And I'm actually going to go ahead and sharpen the blade now so I can do my edge test. I like to test my knives on antler. The intensity of the test varies on what I'm actually going to use the knife for, but on a chopper like this or a camp knife like this, I'm going to test it pretty hard. It's a knife that's meant to be used, and if it takes too much damage on the antler, then it's probably not going to hold up in its normal use. But I got this to the point where it's doing really good on the antler, not taking any damage or anything like that, and it's holding up great without having too thick of an edge, so I think it's actually going to do really well. Now I'm just going to hand sand out that handle and then, well, actually chop something. Well, everyone, that's all I've got for this video. If you're interested in buying this knife or anything from me, you can find my email down in the description. Also, if you're not following me on Instagram, you should definitely do that. Same thing, like and subscribe, that would be fantastic if you're feeling like it. Yeah, have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, everyone.